The phone rang at 12 minutes past midnight, and my first instinct was wrong number. Then I saw her name. Claire Maddox does not call people at midnight. Claire Maddox does not call people at all if there is a bullet-pointed email that could accomplish the same thing in half the time. So when her name lit up my screen at 12 past 12 on a Tuesday, I answered it the way you answer a door you already know has something different waiting on the other side. "I lied," she said. No greeting, no preamble, just her voice, quieter than I had ever heard it anywhere outside of a one-on-one meeting where she was being careful about something. "I never actually hated you." I stood in my kitchen in the dark. I did not say anything for a long moment, because here is the thing. Here is the part I hadn't yet said out loud either. I had been sitting in that same dark kitchen 3 minutes before the phone rang, staring at the door of my refrigerator and thinking about nothing specific. Except the nothing specific was not nothing at all. It was her. I already knew. I just hadn't said it out loud either. My name is Nathan Cole. I'm 33 years old. I work as a project manager at Halston Group, a mid-sized architecture consultancy, where you spend 2 months crafting a detailed proposal for a client who then hires someone cheaper and acts surprised when it looks like it cost less. I manage timelines, subcontractors, client expectations, and when necessary the creative directors who have strong, occasionally alarming feelings about typeface selection. It is honest work. It is consistently understaffed. It runs on an unreasonable quantity of coffee. I live alone. 1-bedroom apartment. Corner window that receives approximately 11 minutes of direct sunlight per year despite what the listing claimed. One plant that is still alive through stubbornness. Mine or its. I have never fully determined which. No particular backstory on the plant. It simply refuses to give up, and I respect that about it more than I probably should. Claire Maddox came into my life 8 months before that midnight phone call, via a parking space she didn't know was mine. First week at the firm. No one had given her the allocation list. I arrived to find her car in my spot, already late to a 9 o'clock, and I called out as she was walking toward the building. She turned around. Listened for exactly 4 seconds. I don't know why I counted. I was stressed. I just did. Said, "No one told me. I'll sort it," and kept walking. She didn't slow down. I stood in the parking lot for a moment. Then I moved my car. Her name came through the HR announcement that afternoon. Claire Maddox, senior analyst. The director, Miles, introduced her at the all-hands meeting with a kind of controlled warmth that signals the hire was expensive. She sat in the front section with a dark green notebook open on her knee, the cap always pressed flat against the back cover in a specific way. The same way every time. And she didn't smile until someone else did first. When she did, the smile was small and deliberate, as though it had been pre-approved by a committee before distribution. In meetings, she was always 2 steps ahead of wherever the conversation currently was, and she had the particular patience of someone who has already seen where a discussion is going and is waiting with mild politeness for everyone else to arrive. She disagreed with precision. She never overstated a point. When she was right about something, which was often, she said so once, quietly, and then moved on, and you remembered it precisely because she hadn't made a production of it. We ended up in professional competition almost immediately. Not loudly, not dramatically, just structurally. 2 good people. One firm that only needed one of each at the front of any given account. Clients who noticed. Director who noticed. The 2 of us noticing each other noticing. I told myself that was the whole story. For 8 months I told myself that. The Alderton account changed things. It was a commercial redesign, a mid-market hotel group, 3 properties, full rebrand, deadline before the following summer. Miles had let Claire and me both pitch our approaches separately, which in retrospect was either optimism or a carefully designed social experiment. We each presented on a Thursday afternoon. The room went very quiet after each one, in the specific way rooms get when nobody wants to be the first person to have an opinion on record. Miles called us both in on Friday morning. The office smelled like cold coffee and the trace memory of someone's lunch from the previous day. He sat behind his desk with the expression of a man who had reached a decision and was now managing the aftermath in real time. Both approaches have merit, he said, which in director language means neither one is quite right and we are out of time. We need one proposal, combined, by Wednesday. Claire said nothing. She opened the notebook to that page, the one she always opened to first, the one I had never seen, and uncapped her pen. I said, understood. Miles left. We looked at each other across the table. She said, your methodology is stronger. The contractor sequencing especially. She said it the way you concede a chess position, accurately and without sentiment. I said, your client empathy section is better. Page 6. The long-term guest experience narrative. That works in a way mine didn't. She looked up from the notebook. Just briefly. Then she wrote something down. We worked late that night. The office emptied in stages. 7 o'clock, 7:30, the last assistant gone a little before 8. By 9 it was just the two of us, the ambient sound of the buildings settling around us and traffic muffled from 4 floors below. The overhead lights had been going off in automated sections since 7, and we were down to desk lamps now, which gave the whole floor the quality of something left over from an earlier and quieter version of the same day. She made tea at some point, went to the break room, and came back with 2 mugs and set one in front of me without a word. Black, the way I had mentioned 7 months ago to a junior analyst in a corridor conversation I did not think she had been close enough to overhear. I looked at the mug. She sat back down and kept working. I have poor survival instincts around women who pay attention to things they are not required to remember. We found a conflict late in the evening. A square footage projection on page 14 that contradicted the room counts 2 pages later. She found it first. I could tell because her jaw tightened, just slightly, and she went very still. Not dramatically, just the specific stillness of someone who has identified a problem and is already 3 steps into solving it before anyone else has noticed there is one. Page 14 is wrong, I said. She looked up. The projection doesn't match the room counts on 16. The whole cost model shifts. She read page 14, considered it for a moment, and then she laughed. Not the meeting laugh, not the organized one, something smaller that came out before she could intercept it, and said, how did this survive 2 draft reviews? And it was not a question. It was just a person being briefly and unselfconsciously honest. She looked away too quickly. That bothered me more than it should have. I drove home that night and told myself I was just tired. This is the most productive lie available to a person. It explains nearly any internal disruption without requiring further examination. The brain accepts it gratefully. You can sleep on it. The truth was simpler and considerably less convenient. I had spent a significant portion of the previous 2 hours watching Claire Maddox work in a quiet office, and I had been noticing things. The way her handwriting changed when she was writing something fully formed in her head versus still working it out. The way she exhaled just before naming a problem out loud. The laugh, the unrehearsed one, the stillness, the tea she'd made without a word about it. And I had not thought about the Alderton account for the last 45 minutes of any of this. I parked, made a second coffee I didn't need, stood at my kitchen window and looked at the street for a while. I told myself, proximity, Late hours. Empty building. These things create a signal that isn't actually there. I went to bed. I thought about the square footage error on page 14, which is what I would like you to believe, and for a portion of the night I may have actually accomplished that. 4 things happened over the following week and a half. I will tell them to you in order, because they each mattered, and together they added up to something I should have been able to name earlier. The first was a sticky note on my monitor Friday morning. Pale yellow. Her handwriting. No name on it. A single correction to the timeline I had drafted. She had found a contractor scheduling conflict in the sequence I'd mapped, flagged it, resolved it, and left the note before I arrived. I stared at it for a moment. Then I put it in my desk drawer. I told myself it was documentation, good professional practice, keeping project correspondence. This is technically accurate. It is also, I recognized even at the time, not the reason. That is hiding with better paperwork. The second thing happened on Monday afternoon. Copy room. Door open. Claire was on the phone, from the cadence of it, a friend rather than a colleague, and I was walking past and she said, "He's actually not that bad to work with. Don't tell anyone I have a reputation." A short laugh. "Then no," I said, "not bad. That is the complete sentence. Stop extrapolating." I kept walking. She had not said just not bad. I noticed that. I continued noticing it for the rest of the day in a way that was neither efficient nor comfortable. The third thing was the notebook. Final review meeting. The day before submission. She had the notebook open, as always. At some point she stood to retrieve something from the printer, and the notebook slid toward the edge of the table. I caught it. I handed it back. I did not look at the open page intentionally. I looked at it anyway. A column of bullet points in her handwriting, meeting notes, timeline items, a question marked for Miles about the client approval chain. Standard, professional, exactly what you would expect. At the bottom of the page, in handwriting smaller than the rest, separated from the list by a full line of blank space, "Stop watching him think she took the notebook from my hand." I gave it to her. Neither of us looked at the other for approximately 5 seconds. She sat back down, opened the notebook to a different page, and said, "I think the header on page 9 needs adjusting," and the meeting continued. Something shifted in my chest. Not dramatically, just enough. I said nothing. That part was a decision. The fourth thing was smaller than the others, and I noticed it anyway, which tells you something about my state of mind by that point. Thursday afternoon, across the open plan floor. She was looking at her phone. Then, she looked up in the direction of my desk. Then, she looked back at her phone. There was nothing near my desk that required looking at. There was nothing in that direction at all. I told myself I had misread the angle. I had not misread the angle. The submission went in Wednesday morning. The client responded positively Thursday afternoon. Miles sent a brief congratulatory email to both of us. No formal celebration. Houston isn't that kind of firm, and by Thursday evening the account was filed in the system, and we were both back on our own assignments. Claire and I passed each other in the corridor Thursday afternoon. She said, "Good work." I said, "You too." That was the full conversation. But she paused, just a beat longer than the words needed. She stood there, and she looked at me, and then she left. I went back to my desk and looked at my screen for a while, without reading any of it. The following week was normal on the surface. Separate accounts, separate meetings, the professional courtesy that had always been our baseline. But something underneath it had shifted in a way that was difficult to locate. and impossible to ignore. I was aware of where she was in the room. I was aware when she left for a meeting and when she returned. I was aware, which I recognized as information about myself that I had not requested. By Tuesday evening, I had decided I was going to do nothing. It was a professional environment. She had not said anything. I had not said anything. 4 words written in small handwriting at the bottom of a notebook page, and a pause in a corridor that lasted 1 beat too long. These are not declarations. They are private things that belong to the person who had them. I was going to respect that. I meant that completely. I just hadn't anticipated her calling me at 12 past midnight to disagree. The apartment was quiet. I'd been reading something I wasn't retaining. The plant on the windowsill looked, as it often does, faintly accusatory. The street outside was almost silent. The phone lit up. Claire Maddox. 12:12 a.m. I picked it up. She said, I lied. I didn't speak. The kitchen was dark. I hadn't moved. I told Diane 3 weeks before we started working together that I thought you'd be difficult to collaborate with. That you were territorial about accounts. That I had concerns about the working dynamic. A pause. None of it was based in anything real. You had not given me a single reason to characterize you that way. I said it because I wanted it on record in case I needed a professional explanation later. In case of what? I said. She didn't answer that immediately. I heard her exhale, long and deliberate. I noticed you my first week, she said. The parking lot. You were late. It was your space. You had every legitimate reason to escalate it into a thing, and you just moved your car. A pause. I thought about that for the rest of the day, and I couldn't figure out why. Something in me went very still. Not surprised. Something closer to recognition. The feeling of understanding something you'd already partially understood and were now being asked to finish out loud. Claire, I said carefully. You don't have to. I'm not finished, she said. She took a breath. Clear and deliberate. I heard it clearly on the line. I named you in my phone as Cole Alderton when the project started. Appropriate, professional, and then after the submission I went to update it, just to remove the account tag. It wasn't relevant anymore, and I couldn't decide what to replace it with. I kept typing and deleting. I've been staring at your name in my contacts for 6 days because I cannot figure out what label actually fits. And I cannot stop noticing that I can't. Her voice dropped just slightly, not small, just without the particular layer of management she carried into every other room. I've been sitting on my kitchen floor for 20 minutes trying to decide whether to call you. The room changed. No, I changed in it. I sat down on my own kitchen floor, back against the counter. I am not entirely clear why the floor, there were chairs, the counter was right there, but it felt like the correct altitude for the conversation. The copy room, I said. Monday, you were on the phone. I heard you. She went still. I felt it through the line. You said I wasn't that bad to work with. You said it quickly and tried to pull it back. I kept walking because it felt like something I'd overheard that wasn't meant for me. I exhaled. I kept your sticky note. The Friday correction. I put it in my desk drawer next to a pen that has been out of ink since March that I haven't thrown away. I told myself it was documentation. It is not documentation. I don't know what it is. But I have opened that drawer twice this week for no reason, and the note is what I look at. Silence on the line. I know, she said. I noticed the notebook. In the meeting. I didn't intend to read it, but I looked and I know, she said again. I saw you notice. I pretended I hadn't. A pause. I wrote that line 3 days before that meeting. I'd been writing it to remind myself to stop, and I kept not stopping. so I wrote it down. It didn't help. I looked at the ceiling of my apartment, at the familiar dark shape of it. "What's my name in your phone right now?" I said. A long pause. "Nathan," she said. Just that. My first name, which she had not used, not once, in 8 months of shared meetings and competing proposals and one very long night in a half-dark office over a hotel brief with an error on page 14. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" She repeated. "That fits," I said. "That's the right one." She laughed then, the real one, the unorganized one I'd heard exactly once before. And then she laughed at herself for laughing, and I heard something ceramic set down against something solid, and I started laughing too, at 12 past midnight on a kitchen floor for no structural reason. The way you laugh when the relief is so complete, you don't know what else to do with the rest of yourself. We talked for another hour, about nothing important and everything that was. The parking lot, my plant and its ongoing philosophical position on survival, the time she got lost on the way to a client site in February and arrived 9 minutes late and told everyone it was traffic. She had not told anyone that before. I didn't ask her why she was telling me. I'm glad she did. Somewhere past 1 in the morning, my upstairs neighbor walked across the floor. 3 heavy steps. The kind that means someone forgot to take their shoes off before remembering, and the sound came down through the ceiling and interrupted us. "It's late," Claire said. "It is," I said. A pause. "Good night, Nathan," she said. I held the phone for a moment after she hung up. Then I sat there on the kitchen floor in the quiet, with a stillness in my chest that I had not felt in a long time. Not exactly excitement. Something more settled than that. Something like a thing clicking into the correct position after 8 months of being slightly, persistently, imperceptibly wrong. 3 weeks later, the building reshuffled the parking allocations. She found out about my new spot before I did, left a sticky note on my car windshield with a number and a small arrow pointing in the right direction. Her handwriting. No name on it. I kept the note. She knows this. She finds it professionally embarrassing and personally acceptable, which is approximately how she approaches most things about me. 5 months later, I came to her desk with a question about a contractor timeline. She looked up from the notebook and said, "Page 3, before I could finish forming the sentence. She had anticipated the question and written the answer down 2 hours earlier. I stood there. "You're staring," she said without looking up. "You wrote it before I asked. You always ask on the day the phase shifts." It was predictable. She glanced up, briefly. "Close your mouth, Nathan." I closed it. She went back to the notebook. I understood, standing at her desk, that I had not been watching someone I couldn't place for 8 months. I had been watching someone who had already placed me, carefully, specifically, in small handwriting, at the bottom of a page she wasn't supposed to show anyone, and had simply been waiting to find out what I would do. 2 years later, when people ask how we met, Claire tells the parking lot story. She leaves out the part where she found it funny. She presents it as a cautionary tale about internal resource allocation and onboarding gaps. When she gets to the midnight phone call, she summarizes. I tell it correctly. She gives me a particular look when I do, the one that means she is pretending to be more annoyed than she actually is. She has used it many times. I have learned to read it correctly. Nothing important had appeared overnight. It had simply stopped hiding. What would you have done if your work rival called you at midnight to say she'd been lying, and the lie was that she never actually hated you at all? And have you ever spent months pretending something was purely professional when you already knew it wasn't? Tell me your story in the comments. If you liked this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.